Hey everyone, this is Matthew Butler from butlerm.com, and this is another tutorial in After Effects. So basically I'm playing this video that I made, and we're going to be recreating this little effect I have going on using Trapcode Particular mostly. So buckle up, should be a fun ride. So let's hop into After Effects, and first of all you can either use text or you can just use a logo. I originally used a logo, so I'm going to be using a logo for this. I'll import my logo, and since this is the AETuts logo, I'm going to be importing the composition. I'm doing it layer size, but if you're just using text, you're going to do this a little bit differently. You're going to skip that step and just make a new composition. We can just make it 864 by 486, 9.97, and let's just make it 7 seconds long and rename this logo Animator. Alright, and this composition that we just made, we were going to be either putting your text in here or you're going to be putting your logo in here. So I'm going to open up my AETuts logo and only going to be importing the AE part of it. Copy that, paste it in here, bam. Alright, linking the E with the A, so I only have to animate the A now. Make sure continuous rasterization is on. Make this a little bit bigger. And basically, as you saw in this animation, these little orange dots, squares that come up, this is what we're going to be animating right now. So we want to make a keyframe for all the following: position and scale. And just to make sure I'm in the middle of the composition, it's good to turn this little title action safe on. Alright, so this is the starting position. Also, we need a transparency, I suppose. Make a transparency keyframe, drop that to 0, 10 frames at 100, and let's go about 20 frames in. Drop this down to 125%, bring it to the right, and we're going to have it go to the left then, probably 20 frames after that. And right here we want to line it up to be approximately where your logo is going to be, your resting part, if you have a logo. If you don't have a logo and just using text, then you can just not follow this step and center your text right here in the middle instead of moving across. So now that we have that in place, we are going to need to bring in this whole composition of the logo so I can line up exactly where the logo is going to be placed. So obviously I'm going to drop this down to 100% and move this a little bit farther to the right. Alright, that looks good. Okay, can delete that layer now and copy the opacity and paste it in the E, since I have 2 layers for that. And delete this text layer as well. Alright, that's what we're looking like so far. So I'm going to save this out right away. I'm going to name it square. Save to the desktop, just so if anything happens, got it backed up. Now we should make another composition which is going to be holding basically all the animation. It's going to be your final render. And I like to name it final just so I know exactly what it is. You want to bring the composition that you just made, and also you're going to want to make a new solid, and you want to make the width and height the same. Probably 80 by 80 would be a good starting point. There's our square. We can turn that square off and make another new solid, which is going to be our particular layer. And drop these back up to 864 by 486. And bring in particular. Alright, now we're going to want to change the particles to be that white 80 by 80 square that we just made. So in the particular type, we're going to go down to sprite and change that to white solid 1. Now we're going to want to change the emitter to layer and change the layer to this logo animation. We also want to make sure we have 3D layer enabled here. So now that that's set up, need to change the layer sampling from current time to particle birth time. Change the amount of particles. Let's bring this up to 1,000. This particular layer, we're going to need to increase the amount of particles, let's say to 10,000. That should be a jump. So drop this down to a half for quality to make it run a little bit quicker for you guys. Lifetime randomness, we're going to want to increase that to, let's say, 40. The size, we're going to want to drop that down probably to 2, maybe a little bit bigger, 3. Size random, turn that up to 30. Probably too high for that. 20. And opacity randomness, we want to increase that to 80. 80 sounds good. Okie dokie. We want to go into the physics section now, in the air, and increase this wind -1,000. See if that works better. Okay, probably about here. When it gets down, let's say the 19th frame, we're going to want this layer to stop emitting particles. You want to put a keyframe here for the particles. Go 1 frame ahead and drop this down to 0. So now no more particles are emitting. Next up, we're basically going to do the same thing for the across now. 1 second here, we might want to drop this velocity down to 0. Yeah, that looks a lot better. Particles will moving around a little bit too much. Drop that down to 0, that helps a lot. Alright, so duplicate this layer. Basically have the same thing going on here, except we're going to want to have these a little bit smaller. These are going to represent the little particles that fly over it at the end. So we're going to want to change the size. Let's drop it down to 1.7. And then drag your layer from the 0 starting frame and drag it all the way out to, say, the first keyframe for the particular layer number 3 here. And we're also going to want to turn the wind off. So find your wind in the Z direction, turn that to 0. And we're going to want to turn now the velocity up, let's say 50. Let's check out, particles are stopping, should be stopping about right here. So we're going to need to increase the keyframes a few frames to the right to have them on screen longer. And that should work pretty well. So since this is the AETuts logo that we're working with, and the background's basically this purple, we can add this purple color into these blocks. The easiest thing would be go down to color over life. Obviously you can't click it because the sprite isn't colorized. We're going to need to change this layer RGB up here to none. Change your sprite to colorized, go down to set color, and do random from gradient. Now for this gradient, we're going to want to choose the lightest purple that we have here. Take out these other 3 in the middle, and then go make a dark purple color. Double click on that tag right there, and that should work out great. Probably want to copy this, so click the copy button and paste it in the other layer as well. Color over life, paste. Oh, we gotta do the same thing over here. We gotta change it to colorize and change this RGB to none and random from gradient. Now we can paste it in. Okay, so this is what we have going on right now. We can delete this purple layer now. So that's pretty neat right now. And finally, we are going to want to duplicate this new particular layer and drag it over, probably to the last keyframe. Let's drag it a few frames before the last. And we're going to want to change a few settings on here. First off, we're going to want to change this layer that it's getting its source from to a new layer. So let's go back to your project, and the same layer that has your part of your text animating on, or your logo, we're going to want to make a duplicate of that. So Command D, duplicate of that. I'm going to rename this whole, and we're going to want to copy all of these from my logo and paste them in. So you can line your logo up with the text that's already there, and you can delete the original layers. And now we're going to go back to our final composition, drag in that new whole logo animation layer, make it 3D, and go back to your new particle layer that you created just a second ago. We're going to change this layer here to whole. Let's only make that visible so we know what we're dealing with. We're going to want to only have that be emitting for about 4 or 5 frames, and we're going to want it to gradually decrease. So let's bump this up to 20,000 and then have it decrease. And change the life to probably 1 second. That should be plenty. And the life randomness, we can make it 50%. Okie dokie. One thing I just noticed right now, we're going to need to go to the opacity over life. And you can just click this little ramp up and ramp down button over here on the side. You can just copy that if you want and paste it into the other two layers here. Actually, the bottom layer you don't need to do it to, because those are floating off the screen, so that one doesn't really matter as much, but you will need to have it animate on. I have the opacity down, so you can have a ramp like that for your bottom particular layer. And one last thing is drop this velocity. Let's drop it down to like 20, something pretty low, because these are flying pretty fast. Might need to change the size as well, I guess. 1.1. In this middle particular layer, probably going to have to drop those down as well. Drop those down to 30. That'd probably be best. Okie dokes. Save that, and also these two layers that we brought in, the 3D ones, we can disable those, turn that off, because we won't be needing those in the final animation. You'll still need them in the composition, but not on. Moving on to the square part, the fun part. Your original layer that has your original composition that has your logo or text, this I guess this one, you can duplicate that. We're going to want to rename it logo rev, as in logo reveal. So open that up. You can turn this background off again, and we're going to want to drop that logo rev into another composition just to make it easier on ourselves, since I have multiple layers I'm dealing with. Now you might not, so you can possibly just skip making a new composition. Not a big deal. We're going to want to make two masks, two square masks, one a little bit bigger and one a little bit smaller. We're going to want to make mask keyframes for both of them. Let's start out with the smaller one. So you want to make it pretty close to each other, basically almost touching. Then go ahead, let's say 23 frames. That's probably too much. 18 frames. Let's increase this all the way to the edge. Edge of your type would probably be best. And for this one, the second one, let's go to 13 frames in. Bring your original keyframe over to that 13. And we're going to want to go small again. And then probably go 20 frames out and make it a little bit larger than the first mask. And we're going to want to, the way that I did this was a little bit backwards, so I'm going to want to change that to subtract. Yep. Alright, so depending on how you just set up your masks, you might want to fiddle around with the add or subtract to figure out which ones to add and which ones to subtract. Anyways, this second mask layer now, which is mask 1 unfortunately, we want to go one frame before the first keyframe and drag the mask off the video area, so it's not on there in the beginning. So that's basically your animation right now, which is exactly what we need to animate the boxes. So go back to your final composition, drag in your logo revealer, and we're going to want to create a new solid. Let's name it particular square. Put in the particular and we're off and running. Change the emitter to layer, and the layer emitter is going to be this logo rev. Let's make that 3D. Logo rev. And now we're going to want to increase the particles to, let's say, 5,000. See what we have here. There it is. Okay dokes. So change it from current time to particle of birth time. We're going to want to change the velocity to 0. Also going to want to open up shading and open up particle. We're going to want to change this sphere to that square particle that we had originally, this white solid. So we're going to want to make it a texturized polygon and change the texture to that white solid. And we're going to change the size over life to make it kind of like a pyramid. So it'll be peaking in the middle and coming downward. And we're going to want to smooth that out a little bit because I cannot draw a triangle that well, obviously. Smooth that out, push that smooth button. Drop the life down to 1 second. What else? We got shading we're going to want to turn on. Size is probably too small. Bump that up to 10. Shadowlet from main we want on. And of course we're going to need a light. So make a new light. So that's light 1. Let's make that a different color so you can tell from all these. Actually just turn on Shy Guy and that'll fix that problem. Alright. Now we can turn off this logo rev. We don't need that on. Come back into your particular square layer and we're going to want to go to rotation. And I believe this one, random speed R, which is random speed rotate, no, random rotation right there. We're going to want to turn that up, let's say to 28, 25. And that looks fine. And it's just not big enough. So the size, let's bump that up to 20. Let's go with 30. And that should be pretty close to the effect that we're looking for. Might need to mess around with the light settings. Okie dokes. So we're going to need this layer to have color, the actual logo appear under that, or your text. So let's go to your logo rev 2 layer, just make a duplicate of that, and let's name that logo final. You can tell everything apart. Drop that to the bottom of your composition. Let's open that up and we can just turn this bottom mask off, and that's all that you need to do for that. Let's go back into your final composition and we're going to want to place this to where your logo is animating on. so it's close to here. When it starts to bubble up completely, you want to put your start there so it'll swipe on and be perfect. You want to make sure you click this the rasterize, continuous rasterization. Make sure it's clicked on here too. Probably need to click it on here too. Alright, so in the beginning when I opened this composition I didn't click continuous rasterization, so if you just go back to your original composition, if you're using a logo, make sure you have continuous rasterization on so you don't have little blurry edges like I just had. Okie doke, so that's animated on pretty well. Now, you don't have to animate it on in the sweeping from the middle on the outside. You can animate it left to right, whatever you want to do. It's totally up to you, your call. But just basing it on the original logo animation that I did. So now we're going to want to move this to where the second particular layer we made, when that comes across the screen. So let's turn off the particular square, find out when it's sweeping over everything. We got this purple coming up, and probably about 107 we want to have the particular squares start to emerge. Alright. The problem I'm having is I need to bring this layer as well. The logo Rev 2, you want to make sure that is also brought up with particular square. Put that in the same 1 second, 7 frames in, and that should work out. Perfect. Now that we have that animating on, we're going to need to change this original third particular layer. We're going to want to put it right when the swipe in the middle starts to be cleared. So probably around 2.5, you can place that third particular layer to start there. So then we'll have little budding AETuts come up. There should be, at least. Alright, perfect. So let's take a look at what the logo looks like right now, and we'll get to the square part in just a second. So first off, you can tell I need to adjust the beginning because it takes too long to come up. And we need to see a little flake of this animation start already. So we're going to want to bring particular 2, particular 3, particular square, and these 2 bottom layers, we're going to want to bring them forward 10 frames, let's say. And of course, these squares are appearing above this original 2 particular layers, so we want to position the particular layers, these first 2 I'm selecting, onto the top of the composition. And of course, since we did that, we need to adjust when this particular number 2, the end of it, of the particulars appearing, stops. We're going to drag that out to 2 seconds compared to where it was like 1 second. So that should help. And finally, this probably, it's just a preference thing, but I'd want to have the squares of this particular layer underneath the brown white, black, and brown squares. So I'm going to drop it down here, but it's just a preference thing. Now that we have that done, we can put in a background to start with, and then we'll get to the squares of the AE. And put in another solid that's a little bit darker than the white. And just make a quick mask around it. Just get in the corners a little bit. Put a feather on there. And subtract for the mask. A little bit more feathering. That looks good. And let's save it. And bring in the squares now. Now, my original animation didn't have any squares, just had a normal logo and the text next to it, so I'm just weighing this part. Depending on your logo, you might not have to do this step, but I'll just do it anyways. You want to just click on your logo animator, duplicate it. Let's change the title to background, logo animator background. Double click on that. You can now click on your original logo layer, copy your background right here, and just paste it in onto your composition. So it should be like that. It's not going to be exactly where it should be, but it'll do for this. So you can turn off the A and the E. What I'm going to do for this is, let's have a mask on one here. Just gets inside. Probably gonna have to get on full. Alright. So you want it right at the corners of this logo. Now we're gonna make a keyframe. Go to the very beginning. Select all the edges here, and we're going to want to shrink that down while holding Command and Shift and make a little tiny box. You're going to want to put a ease on it, so Shift F9. Then if you want to hop into the animation path, change it to be a little bit more curvy so it animates slowly to the edges. You'll notice right there. And you want to bring your background into the final composition. Just group it in with all the other ones. So you got your other square here. And we're going to do just a scale on that one. So you want to make a keyframe for your size being at 100. Shrink it down to 2. And then probably 3 or 4 frames from the last keyframe. Let's bring it up to 106. And put eases on all of these last 2. So it bounces a little bit. And we want to move these scale keyframes a little bit farther over. Take that bounce out. Not liking it. These are animating on pretty slowly, I guess. We'll bring the keyframes in a little bit. One final thing, you got to make sure you turn on continuous rasterization and also turn on the motion blur. I guess we're going to have to turn on motion blur for everything. Hop into your motion path here again. Let's drag out, make it more dramatic of a slowdown. That should work great. Save it. And let's watch how it animates on. Oh, this logo layer needs to be above your background or else you're not going to see the AETuts. So that looks pretty neat. Might want to change this third particular layer. I believe it's this one, the small ones. Might want to change the over to like an ad or a screen. So I think we have basically the animation all set up to be pretty close to what I originally had. Although these blocks seem to be animating slowly on. It should be a little bit quicker. Let's see if we can fix that real quick. Let's take this layer, this layer, this layer, and this layer. Nope, not that layer. These two layers and this layer. I want to grab all of these and bring them forward. That should help out a little bit. It looks much better. This is the final animation, but this big purple block here flying past is kind of getting in the way of the animation. So the easiest thing to do for that would be go to your top layer and you want to just change the random seed on here. That should fix everything. Unless there's another one that's right in the middle. Alright, give it another whirl. So, that was how to create this 3D square blocking, extruding, exploding type text deal that I have going on here. Pretty fun, can be used in quite a different amount of situations, and I hope you enjoyed the tutorial by me.